So, Wyatt, thank you so much for joining this afternoon. I'd love to start by just charting basically your experience in China, how you first ended up in Beijing through Innovate to now working with Schwarzman Scholars.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to. Thanks so much, Taylor. Happy to be here and always happy to stay connected with Phillips Ambassador. So I had the privilege of going to China as a Phillips Ambassador back in 2008. So I was um, had just finished, actually, sorry, it's 2009. As I think about it, I just finished my sophomore year at Carolina and found out about an opportunity through the minor in entrepreneurship at UNC to do a internship program in Beijing. And at the same exact time I found out about it, I had heard about the Phillips Ambassadors program and very enthusiastically applied. It was really the first touch point for me with China. I had an interest in China before, but never had an opportunity to study Chinese or really engage with learning about China until that point. And so I kind of had a feeling, and based on what I knew so far, that China, as its role on the global stage continued to grow, was going to play an important role in the course of kind of shaping global affairs. And that as thinking about my own career and preparing for that to make an impact in my career, I wanted to make sure I understood China and make sure to help really be a part of what's happening there in some way. So applied to be a Phillips Ambassador, and that was really what started it all for me. It gave me the opportunity to go study in Beijing for the summer in 2009, and then it was kind of a catalyst for me that started me on this trajectory that led me to today. So I spent this summer in Beijing, and then as soon as I came back to UNC, knew that I wanted to go back, and so over the course of the rest of my time at Carolina, I actually applied for some alumni funding for Phillips Ambassadors that allowed me to go back to the village, the migrant village in Beijing, where I had taught for during the time I was there in 2009, and really document the stories of some of the students and families that I worked with, and just to share that back with the Carolina community as a way of raising awareness and introducing them to the Phillips Ambassadors program. So thanks to the Phillips Ambassadors' very generous funding, I was able to go back, do this photo exhibit, come back and get these incredible photos, a couple of which now hang still hang in the Global Ed Center at Carolina, documenting the stories of these amazing friends in Beijing, at the Union, at the Carolina Union, in kind of that hallway on the side there by Davis Library, and did a big reception and to really introduce the Carolina community to these friends, which was incredible. And that really started me. Yeah, I think that those two things were the big catalyst for me that made me look to China after graduating from Carolina. And happy to talk more all about what's led me to today. But those were the first two things I think that really set me on this path. So I'm forever indebted and grateful for Ambassador Phillips and Kim and the entire program and staff, because I think I certainly would not be where I am today without the program. 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I echo, I'm not nearly as far into my career, and I hope it'll be as illustrious as yours is, but I
no doubt it
definitely
will be.
I feel that sentiment. I feel like my experience abroad just it gave me a lot of confidence. I think it made me feel like the sky really is the limit, and like there's so much out there to do, to see, to experience, and like has informed my, just my decision making, just a really transformative experience for me. You said that you always had an interest in China. Do you know, was that an early interest? Where did that really come from?
Yeah, I think it started in middle school for me. I went to a charter school in Raleigh, North Carolina, that had a big emphasis on global education. We had a lot of international students in our class. And so that's where the interest started for me. And then I remember seeing an ad a promotion for Phillips Ambassadors when I was in college, freshman year. And it kind of sparked my interest. That's where I first found out. And then after, when I applied for the minor in entrepreneurship program, applied for Phillips, I just kind of had that feeling that this is going to play a big role in my life, and applied not thinking that I would get it, just to put myself out there, see if to go for it. And then I think it really, as I said, really was the catalyst for me. And I think the mission, especially the idea of really being an ambassador to come, to take what you've learned, take what you observed, take what's really changed your own life, and then figure out a way to share that with your own communities, both at the Carolina level, with your family, with friends back home, with your high school community. I think really stuck with me because I think one of the things that I had seen during my first time in Beijing was really that gap and understanding really between people in China and people in the United States, for example. And that's really the same issue that Schwarzman Scholars right now is working to address, just like Ambassador Phillips and the program, to really help bridge the gap, really to ultimately facilitate world peace, right? That's what we're ultimately working towards. So it's fun. I love that what I get to do now is so well connected to ultimately what started me on this journey at Phillips.
Right. And I wanted to ask you about that gap. Was there like a singular moment, maybe teaching or even upon arrival that you were like, this is completely different from what I expected, or maybe as an instructor, like, oh, this is a really misguided misunderstanding. Like, I want to take up this mantle of eliminating that gap.
Yeah, I think for me, growing up hearing the narrative, in school, in the community, that China's our competitor, China's our enemy, and that seeing that in the news, hearing that from politicians. I mean, you're really surrounded by that in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting there, and I think for me, one of the first things that really opened my eyes was just building a relationship with my roommate, who was from Beijing and grew up there, and we became really close friends over the course of the summer. I still keep in touch today. And he, was my first first friend in China when I was living there. And I think that really opened my eyes. And then I think for me, it was another impactful moment was Ambassador Phyllis and Kim flew us down to Shanghai on a weekend. All the Phillips ambassadors from across Asia flew into Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
We went to this restaurant called Im on the Bund, which overlooks the Huangpu River in Shanghai, looking over the skyline that is really iconic to a city that is really almost like a futuristic city. It's one that
Mm-hmm.
is one of the largest in the world now, and really kind of at the cutting edge in many, many ways globally. And as we were standing there talking to each other, I think it was I'll never forget that moment, because I just remember realizing, like, this is where things are happening. Like, China is going to play an incredible leadership role in the world in every field. And if we're going to be successful at all in solving the problems and the issues that our generations face, it's going to be working with colleagues and friends from China to accomplish and come up with the solutions for those problems. And so it was really, for me, the relationships that I built that year, thanks to Phillips ambassadors, with people from China, with friends from China, and then learning from each other I think there was always this other perspective that was ingrained from growing up in the US, where you see China as so far, so distant, but also in a negative light. And just being there and getting to know friends, getting to know the culture, starting to study the language, and really having that sense of, wow, this is where things are happening. Like, this is the center, and this is where I want to be. This is what I want to orient my career around, especially addressing this gap between China and the United States and the rest of the world. So it's funny, because I think that mission, the mission that I'm working on right now for work, it really, like I said, really did start back then.
Absolutely. And I feel like even if it's just sometimes thought about solely in name, like the role of an ambassador is pivotal, to bridging that gap. So I'd love if you could maybe speak about what that relationship building looked like for you, if you set out with intention, or if you were just like, wow, these are genuine, awesome people, like, or did you know when you were going overseas, like, I want to, really like form these relationships, make sure that I, I'm highlighting them when I get back, and how you've been able to maintain them and how that aligns with your work.
Yeah, I think the word ambassador, to me, I think it's the perfect word, because I think it is exactly the role I felt honored to play as soon as I went to Beijing and knew that I would be going back and sharing this experience with the Carolina community and beyond. I think for me, the relationships are at the core of it all, and that's what I love about Phillips, is that every program that students go on, through UNC Study Abroad and through Phillips, the relationships are at the core, whether it be living with a roommate, or going to classes with students from the location they're studying. and many other ways to engage. I think for me, the relationship piece, like I said, started with my roommate, and it really went beyond that. I think one of the things I remember from the kind of orientation course with Phillips Ambassadors before we went was about really making an intentional effort to engage and to connect with those around you when there. And I think for me, one of the things I saw immediately upon arrival in Beijing in my program was that there's a very common occurrence where, and I'm sure you saw this as well, Taylor, where students coming from the United States and other places tend to kind of circle the wagons and connect with each other and go out on the weekends together and not really engage with the people that are right around them. And I think for me, seeing that face to face, and then there was a couple of us who really made the intentional effort to get to know, for example, everyone on our hallway, right? And instead of going to the more westernized part of Beijing on a Friday night to hang out and get dinner, we would go and ask them what they were up to, and then they invited us to come join them, whether it be going to grab dinner or go back and see their family for the weekend, or go to karaoke, or go explore a new part of Beijing together, or just go to a coffee shop. And so I think for me, looking back on that first summer, that intentional investment in those relationships really opened my eyes to really understand a perspective I'd never really heard or experienced before, make extremely special lifelong friendships. And then for me, that leaving Beijing that first summer and coming back, as I talked to people, I remember going back to my high school. I remember going and speaking when I did this exhibit at the Carolina Union through Phillips. It's the relationships that I talked about all the time, right? It was the people to people exchange that study abroad is really all about, is what I think really first connected me to China. And as I look back on my career so far, that's really what we've maintained those relationships, and that's opened so many doors, I think, on so many fronts. And I think as I think about the larger mission of the program, that's really what it's all about, making those connections, and then putting those connections to work to really serve the mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I do want to talk a little bit about your work with Schwarzman Scholars, why you feel like this is, a perfect role for you in this moment of your career to help end educational inequality and help bridge that gap.
Yeah, for sure. So after Schwarzman, I had after Phillips Ambassadors, after graduating from Carolina in 2011, for me, the two big pieces that were at the forefront for me were that really came from my time in China were working on education and the China piece, right? And knowing that the intersection of those two is a really unique field and a really important one. So I started my work, moved back to China, did Teach for China for 2 years. Join an organization with the mission to really bridge, like you said, the inequality gap between large urban centers in China and more rural areas. So taught middle school English for a couple of years, which was a life-changing and incredible experience. During that time, got to go back to Beijing several times to see both my friends from when I was there for Phillips, and also back to the school that I first taught at, and kept connections with those students. And then, since then I've had the real privilege to work on really the kind of the leading initiatives in U.S.-China education exchange. So I got to ironically go over to Duke, which is I learned, very early on with Phillips Ambassadors, though we have a competitive spirit, it's I love the fact that there are Duke students who join us at Phillips every year. And so I in that spirit, the Ambassador Phillips year, I went over to Duke and proudly joined the startup team for Duke Kunshan University, kind of the first Sino-American institution of higher education. Got to work there for a couple of years, which is an incredible kind of first job in my career after Teach for China. And then got to work with NYU Shanghai for 3 years, which is this largest institution of its kind, which is a joint venture university between NYU and East China Normal University. And that really solidified my interest in admissions, right? So, really serving as a door holder almost to invite students from around the world to engage, to join us in this mission of bridge building. And that ultimately led me to Schwarzman Scholars. It's a program that had been on my radar really since leaving Carolina, because it first started or conversations first started about it when I was first starting my career, and had been on my radar, and I knew a mentor from Duke who was on the board of the program as it launched, and it was really, for me, as always in my mind, as a place where I would really ultimately love to work here, because I just admire the mission so much, because it really is so in line with the Phillips Ambassador's mission. So I joined in May of 2019, and I worked to help oversee our U.S. global selection process, which is a really unique admissions process that is designed to identify and select kind of the next generation of leaders from around the world, from across sectors and fields. So like Phillips, there's not a academic thread that ties our scholars together, but it is this idea of demonstrated leadership. So we're looking for the people who are going to be leaders of impact in their field in the future. And Steve Schwarzman, who founded the program and is my boss, his vision, right in line with the Phillips vision, is really to build a network of young leaders from around the world, from across sectors, bring them together with their counterparts in China. So the next generation of leaders from China, they live and learn together for a year at Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University, and really get a front row seat to what's happening in China. An enormous amount of investment and leadership development from leaders across China and around the world. And then ultimately we'll graduate with a master's in global affairs from Tsinghua University, China's top institution of higher ed. And really the entire point of the program is then to go out into the world and build your leadership career. And then as these Schwarzman scholars step into positions of influence around the world, this network will really be activated to really serve the mission of the program, which is ultimately to build understanding between China and countries around the world, recognizing that is incredibly important for not only solving the problems that our generation and the ones that come after us will face, but ultimately it's a world peace, right? That's really important component of that mission. And so I love doing admissions for that, because it's kind of the first piece of this. So it's identifying young leaders who may have never even heard of the program before. And much of the work like Dory does at Phillips Ambassador is helping, put this on the radar of people who it's an amazing fit for, who may not even know that yet. And then, helping them, supporting them through the process. And then ultimately putting together this incredible class of about 150 scholars every year from usually 35 to 40 countries to really embark on this mission. So I think about Phillips Ambassadors every day, because one, we always have some amazing UNC students apply, some of which are Phillips Ambassadors. And I have I have my Phillips plaque here in my desk from
How lovely.
April 30th, 2011. Which reminds me always of what started me on this mission. And one of the moments where it all clicked for me when I started it at Schwarzman Scholars in May of 2019. Steve Schwarzman and part of our admissions team had actually been down to Carolina to go to one of the Phillips luncheons where Steve and Phil did a session together. And hopefully something that we can do again in the near future. But that's where it all clicked to me, that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, because I think it's so connected to what I'm passionate about. And like I said, that all started with Phillips Ambassadors.
That is so lovely, Wyatt. I feel like, to me,
Crazy,
what
right?
really things like really, genuine and like beautiful about the program is the world peace aspect. I've been doing a lot of thinking about, like community and coalition building, and just how to move forward as a state, as a nation, as a global population. And I think while it's really easy to get stuck in your sides, or, to feed into like division that's sown intentionally or not, there's really, the only way out is together, right? And so just being able to like look at things from a really high level, like you have, these incredible applicants, like you said, these really brilliant and talented minds, and like we want them to prosper in their individual fields, but we also know that like there's a even bigger picture, which is like, if we want to, take care of our world, take care of our global population, it's got to be done in a sense of community.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And I think it's there's never been a more important time to kind of train the next generation of leaders. That's exactly what Phillips and Schwarzman both are doing. And I think the last year that we've lived through really proves that leaders have to be able to work across continents, across time zones, languages, cultures, across, barriers, both physical and metaphorical, to really solve problems and work together. And so I love that that's what, that's what these programs are really all about. So I think that's what will carry us through, programs like this, and the mission that we're on will carry us through these dark times, I think, and build for the future, which with the amazing people coming through these programs, I'm optimistic about the future. So it's that's one of the things that wakes me up every morning, is getting to work with amazing people like you all, because it reminds you that, okay, we're going to get through this this season, and I think this people to people exchange and bridge building that we're doing will really be the thing to make the difference in the long run.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to ask some fun questions. I wanted to ask if you had a favorite food while you were abroad, or maybe a dish that you tried for the first time when you were in Beijing, and like something you eat all the time. Mine is Taiwanese beef noodles. I go crazy for beef noodles too. So I wanted to know if you had something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my favorite cuisine I ate, especially my first year in China, was to go back home with my roommate Gary to his parents' house in the western part of Beijing, about an hour from the campus where we were staying. We would go back. He invited me to come back many times, which is so gracious of him. And his parents would cook for us, and it was just the best home cooked meals I've ever had. So delicious, so healthy, and they would take the time to really introduce me to the history behind each dish, and why it was a part of their family's history, but also placing it in the context of kind of cuisine in Beijing. So I think of every type of meat, every type of vegetable that I could imagine, made in the most incredible way. So I've been back several times since then to see Gary and his parents, and but that first summer, those meals together, sitting around the table with a family, really learning firsthand about their experience in Beijing, is what so memorable to me. So I love, in China, food is very much connected to community, and so there's a lot to the community that I built and still have today in China is centered around amazing food.
Great. And have you mastered any of those dishes in your own kitchen?
Sadly, not. But
no.
I can do very basic things that I've learned, especially when I was doing Teach for China. I did learn to cook some very basic noodle dishes, but I've got to get back to China this year to
call up your parents and tell them to start writing the cookbook for you.
That's right. Exactly.
I also was wondering if you had like a really significant moment of culture shock that always sticks with you, or one, that your party favor story about like, oh, I couldn't believe, or even culture shock upon your return.
Yeah, great question. I think for me, I wouldn't call it culture shock. I would just call it something that you can't really understand unless you experience it, was the scale of China and its growth and development. I think when I remember landing in the Beijing airport in June of 2009, and just being absolute in awe, even just as I stepped off the plane, to see the scale of the airport, and then to get on the bus. I remember my first ride into the city, and seeing the size of Beijing, really, had been to New York City, had been to a couple large cities in the United States. This was beyond anything I've ever you could ever even understand just by reading it or seeing videos or pictures. You have to see it for yourself. A city of 20 plus million people at the time, operating so efficiently, and just seeing how it had developed so rapidly over the past 30 years. So that was the biggest thing for me, just being in awe of the scale, and then which really was a great introduction to really learning about the development of China that summer. And then I think for me, the biggest reverse culture shock, I think I really didn't experience much culture shock when I was in Beijing, because I think I felt so welcomed and so engaged, and people were just so friendly and kind as I started to learn Chinese and get to know the culture. But it was when I came back that I think it was really difficult, because I think whether it be friends on campus or family who really I saw that gap and that misunderstanding face to face in a big way right upon coming back, whether it be getting questions like, wow, what's it like to live in a communist country? That must have been crazy. Questions asked in whether not in almost like a derogatory way, but a way that's really steeped in misunderstanding and assumptions that I felt I really struggled with that for a bit. But then I think it was the mission of the Phillips Ambassadors program and seeing myself as an ambassador that really centered me back to that, realizing there is this gap, there are these misperceptions, but I get to be a part of helping correct those. So even if it's with a family member or a friend or an acquaintance who I get to help change their perception, and invite them to come and engage and see for themselves, even on the person-to-person level. I think that was what really centered me and helped me readjust. Mm-hmm. But I think that it was that momentum and that feeling that really, I think, inspired in me that desire to go back. Right. So I knew that when I left China for the first time in 2009, I would be back soon. I knew it. And I've been back, I think, about 50 times since. So the journey continues. So it's, but I think, yeah, that was, to me, it was the re-entry was much more difficult than the transition there.
Right. Okay. Do you have time for two?
Yeah, sure. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Next fun one, probably my last fun one. Well, I hope they're all fun.
They're all fun, right?
The lighthearted one is, what did you do for fun in Asia? I know you said you had made a concerted effort to really bond with people on your haul, hanging out with Gary's family, but like, what was your this is my new hobby, or like, this is the place I love to go?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. We would go, on the weekends, we'd often go bike riding in the city. Beijing is a very bike-friendly city. And so that was one of the ways that Gary and Florence and other friends from that summer really helped me get to know the city. We would just set out on a Saturday morning early, and just, Beijing is a massive city. And so getting to explore different districts and get different neighborhoods, and then almost kind of trying to get lost in the city and stopping and eating and seeing some of the sights and some of the kind of off the beaten path things that you wouldn't see as a tourist, but that you really have to be with someone who knows, Beijing really well to see. And then I think I learned how to play mahjong, which is an amazing game that I had wanted to learn for a while. And so sitting around the table at night, playing mahjong or going to karaoke together on the weekends, those are where those relationships really formed their depth, and those bonds were formed. So yeah, it was lots of different things, but it was really, I think I look back to the kindness and hospitality of friends there to really help me get connected and kind of feel at home. I very much felt at home that summer in China, and I view China really as my second home to this day. So it all started in 2009. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and my last question is really not a question. I'm wondering if you could offer some parting words of advice for all future Phillips ambassadors.
Absolutely. So I think for advice for future Phillips ambassadors, so you think of people who would apply to the program, or people who are already Phillips ambassadors?
People that are ready to, they're about to step on their plane, or maybe they're a couple months out doing their Phillips coursework.
Awesome.
And it might be a semester-long endeavor, year-long summer work, just for school.
So my advice would be to, sounds cliche, but I think it really impacted me because I heard this advice before I went and started that summer as a Phillips ambassador, was just be intentional and be open-minded. And I think you just never know what this experience in Asia as a Phillips ambassador will do for you. I think for me, as I said, it was really a catalyst and in a massive way, both personally and professionally. So I think more than ever right now, during these times, such divisive times that we live in, disengagement is not the answer, and we all know that. So as you go on start this journey as a Phillips ambassador, just be very intentional about engaging, be quick to listen, be intentional with the relationships that you form, be intentional trying to learn the language of wherever you're studying in Asia. That will serve you well to get to know both the culture and connect with people while you're there. And really, I think, go back to what you said, Taylor, about embracing this really identity of being an ambassador, right? And recognizing that there's really no more of an important role to play right now. As we look at a very tense and divisive geopolitical climate that we're currently navigating, especially when we look at the larger picture on a global scale, even as one person engaging in relationships, and engaging in this people-to-people exchange as a Phillips ambassador, you can play and you will play an important role in that. So there's people at the Carolina community, there's people at your high school community, there's people in your family, there's friends, there's people you haven't even met yet who are really depending on you to go and then come back with the experience, with the stories, with the knowledge that you gained while you're there, and share. Because there's a lot of people who will never have an opportunity to do what you're about to do. There's a lot of people who really need to hear it. They need to know what's happening in Asia. They need to be encouraged to join with you in this mission, and you could play a very pivotal role in helping do that. So never underestimate your ability to make an impact and make a change through your decision to do this. And I really view your decision to be to embark on this journey as a Phillips ambassador as really a leadership decision. You all have shown extraordinary leadership just in taking the leap of faith and joining this program. And I can promise you that you won't be disappointed. You're in for the experience of a lifetime that I think in many ways will help shape the rest of your life and your professional and personal trajectory. So I'm very excited for you, and I look forward to hearing stories and reports back on how things go.
That was the best advice ever. Oh my gosh.
Great questions, Taylor. So great.
Well, Wyatt, thank you so much for joining me this
afternoon.
Course. I'm so appreciative. I will absolutely be stewing on, your wisdom and kind of going back and reflecting on my time abroad. I feel like being in the current employment role that I'm in, being at the end of my undergraduate career and like looking towards the future, but also like working in government and really hoping to, foster peace and create a better place for everyone, that you just really gave me a ton to think about. And I so appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much, Taylor. It's been a privilege, and happy to do this anytime. Happy to please keep in touch and happy to support in any way.
Awesome. Thank you, Wyatt.